The Committee on State and Local Government will come to order. It is Tuesday, March 11, 2025. The time is 12:10. And as members are making their way here, we did try to start a little bit earlier. Just a reminder that today testifiers will be limited to 2 minutes, given the full agenda and the number of testifiers for the bills here. First up will be Senator Ress, Senate File 447, Consumer Protection. Senator Ress, you will be up first. And your testifiers can also make their way to the table too. We have Thomas Elness from AARP and Prentice Cox. Senator Ress, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Senate File 447 is a new initiative that will allow a special revenue account to be created from the fines that are being levied following a court case on that has found that Minnesota citizens have been individually defrauded. And I can go through the bill. Generally, I think the bill, I mean, specifically, I can go section by section if you like. The bill had a full hearing in Commerce, and I understand it's here because it deals with the Attorney General's office. So with that, I can tell you that once those kinds of adjudications are made, the Attorney General or a court, and this is in Section 1, is directed to deposit money that are recovered from those actions where fraud has been decided, and to set up a consumer protection restitution account. The following that public compensation means, and this is now just in Section 2, but means that money that comes from that and how it is identified there. And one of the reasons for that is when these funds are collected and imposed, it is the case that it goes into the general fund if the person who has been defrauded for whatever reason is not identified specifically to receive any of those funds. Then so whatever the amount of the dollars are, 50% of them would be directed to this account with a cap of $1 million. They're able to be distributed to any eligible consumer with a that has a final order that they have been defrauded. And I'm not sure I use the correct legal terms, but I think we understand the impact of the action itself, starting with the oldest state, and then there are a couple of technical corrections. This bill, if it's successful here, would go to the Committee on Judiciary, and then from there to the Committee on Taxes. There is still, which you can correct here or wait until taxes, this bill is not retroactive. There is a mistake in Section 4 that needs to be updated so that its taxable years beginning in 2025. We can correct that now, we can correct it later. The monies that would be received by these Minnesotans would be identified as non-taxable income. And then, similarly to what we're also trying to do with coerced debt, and then because non-taxable income is used as an element of total resources for determining both the renter's credit and the homeowner's refunds, these amounts would not be included there either. So it's both the awards would be non-taxable income, but also not to be included in calculating the renter's credit and the property tax refund. So I think the other parts of it are best testified to by the witnesses. But if at any point anyone would like to ask me a question about a particular section of the bill, happy to respond to that, but trying to be conscious of your time limits, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rest. And we now have quorum. Did you have an amendment that you wanted to move to?
I would like to put
the
that
A1.
that in, let's see.
I think it was the A1 amendment.
Let me find it, but
Senator Rest.
it's a date that is currently 2023, it should be 2025.
All right, thank you,
I
Senator.
believe it's in section 4.
Thank you, Senator Rest. We just a moment as we're trying to get the amendment.
The amendment is at the advice of Senate Counsel for the Tax Committee.
All right, thank you, Senator Rest.
It's on page 8, lines 26, 27. The effective date, it should read, this section is effective, strike retroactively and insert, strike retroactively on line 8.26 and on line 8.27, strike 2023 and insert 2025.
Okay,
That
I'm going to
change
have
would-
counsel restate
Yeah,
it, Senator
that-
Rest.
We can do it later, but if you want to do it now, the other one is with regard to the refunds, and that's on page 10. There's no retroactivity in the bill for that.
Okay,
We didn't catch that in the Commerce Committee, sorry about that.
thank you, Senator Rest. I'm going to hand it off to counsel to read off it'll have to be an oral amendment.
Mr. Chair and members, the amendment that Senator Rest is proposing is on page 8, line 26, delete retroactively. Page 8, line 27, delete 2023 and insert 2025. On page 10, line 14, delete retroactively. And on page 10, line 15, delete 2023 and insert 2025.
Thank you, counsel. And Senator Rest, is that how you would like it to be?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's
Senator
accurate
Rest.
now.
All right, thank you, Senator Rest. Senator McQuaid moves the oral amendment to Senate File 447. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The oral amendment is adopted. To the testifier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Thomas Elness, and I serve as the State Advocacy Director with AARP Minnesota. On behalf of our more than 620,000 members statewide, thank you for considering Senate File 447. legislation to create a consumer fraud restitution fund. This is AARP Minnesota's top priority this year, and we want to thank Senator Rest for authoring this important legislation, our bipartisan co-authors, and the Attorney General's office for their support. There's been a lot of discussion about fraud lately, and this bill recognizes the impact of fraud and scams on individual Minnesotans. A fast-growing fraud industry is stealing billions of dollars from U.S. consumers every year. The impact is profound, particularly when victims are older adults who are at a time in their lives when they are least able to recover financially. There are few viable options for recovering money lost to scams, but a consumer fraud restitution fund can help address that problem in 3 key ways. First, this fund will incentivize those who have been scammed to report fraud to the Attorney General. Too often, defrauded Minnesotans do not report the crimes they have experienced. With this increased chance of restitution, defrauded Minnesotans have more reason to report their cases, which will help the state catch and hold more criminals accountable. Second, the creation of this fund incentivizes the Attorney General to pursue these cases. Without the chance of restitution in many scam cases, the Attorney General often prioritizes other cases. As things stand now, public civil law enforcement tools like injunctions and orders to pay money simply don't do enough to stop scam operations. Third, this fund will provide monetary restitution to those who have lost funds to criminals, and you'll meet some of them today. To receive restitution funds, the Attorney General would have to bring a case against a defendant as a consumer enforcement action and obtain a final order establishing that the person was defrauded. Finally, I think it's important to note that AARP is leading the effort to protect Minnesotans from fraud through community education, our AARP Fraud Watch Network, and Fraud Helpline. But as you'll hear today, criminals are becoming more sophisticated and preying on vulnerable Minnesotans. Joining me today are several of our members who will share their stories about being scammed. And next, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to Prentice Cox to explain how the fund would be funded and how the money would be distributed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Cox, please state your name for the record, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Rust. My name is Prentice Cox. I'm a professor of law at the University of Minnesota. I'm also a former assistant attorney general and a consultant on consumer issues to AARP. I'll briefly describe the mechanics of how the proposed restitution fund would work. Essentially, there's money into the fund and there's money out of the fund. Money recoveries that go into the Consumer Fraud Restitution Fund come from a particular source of money. There are basically 2 types of recoveries when the Attorney General brings a public enforcement action. The first is restitution to consumers harmed by the defendant. The Attorney General has plenary authority confirmed by decades of case law and recognized in Section 8.31 to collect restitution for consumers in an enforcement action. Nothing in the bill would change this type of recovery. It's paid by the defendant in the case to the victims, the consumers harmed by the actions of the defendant. The other type of money is every other type of money that's recovered in the case, whether it's civil penalties, attorney fee recoveries, or money generally paid to the state. And it also includes money that couldn't be distributed to consumers as restitution in that case. All of this money currently goes to the general fund under Section 16A.151. This bill takes 50% of those funds, up to $1 million a year, and puts it into the restitution fund. So where does the money go? In order to get money out of the restitution fund under the bill, it can only go to pay for restitution to consumers in Attorney General consumer enforcement actions, where the court orders payment for consumer restitution. But where the defendant is insolvent, or for other reasons the AG can't recover the restitution money from the defendant to pay to the consumers. This means restitution paid to Minnesota consumers who are owed money from a consumer enforcement action by the AG but will never recover the money is where the money from the fund goes. There's no new authority for the AG to bring a consumer action here other than access to a fund to pay consumers who would receive no compensation from court-ordered restitution in an AG action absent the fund. Finally, I note that Subdivision 8 of the proposed new Section 8.37 would require the AG to submit an annual report that identifies all the cases resulting in money into or out of the fund. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And next up, we have Dennis Anderson and Don Patton. And the final testifier is Jessica Whitney. Hello, Mr. Anderson. Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed.
My name is Dennis Anderson. Chair Zhang and committee members, my name is Dennis Anderson, like I just said, and I live in Maplewood. I'm here to address the financial and emotional toll that many experience as victims of fraud and scams. And thank you for allowing me to share my story. It's not easy to sit here and talk about being scammed. It's a time in my life when I was very vulnerable and alone, and those criminals took advantage of that. It's kind of hard to talk about this sometimes. In October of 2023, I received a call that changed my life. The voices on the other end claimed to be my grandson and a public defender. They told me that my grandson had been involved in a car accident in St. Cloud with a pregnant woman. The caller, who said he was my grandson, mentioned that he did not sound like himself because he had a broken nose from the car accident. He pleaded to me not to let the rest of the family know what was going on because he was embarrassed. The supposed public defender provided case numbers and details. He shared that when my grandson was arrested, a police officer demanded to take a blood test to see if he was intoxicated. My grandson refused, but the public defender managed to prove that he was not intoxicated, which helped the case. Throughout the conversation with the public defender, he treated me like a friend, demonstrating that he was there for me and my grandson. I grew to trust this person. So when the public defender said he needed $20,000 in cash for bail immediately, I didn't wait to act. I was desperate to help my grandson. I rushed to the bank, took out $10,000 from one of the branches, and from another branch I took another $10,000. The public defender advised me not to disclose the purpose of the money to the bank, as they said they would probably resist to give me the cash if they knew it was for bail. I received a call from the court system confirming the details and assuring me that the bond money would be returned. But the nightmare didn't end there. I received another call from the public defender who told me the pregnant woman involved in the crash had a miscarriage and my grandson was going to be charged with manslaughter. He claimed he had negotiated a settlement with this woman, and he was able to reduce the amount to pay her from $20,000 to $15,000. But I had to have it delivered the next day. I was running out of funds. I turned to my brother for help. Initially, he gave me the money, but he called me the next day, and he was suspecting it might be a scam. Anxious to learn the truth, I called my grandson, who was safe at home and unaware of what had transpired. I then reported the incident to the Maplewood police, and following that, my family suggested to me to ask the police if they could set up a sting operation with the courier who was going to be scheduled to pick up the additional $15,000. The courier was caught, and his involvement didn't lead to the scammers, even with the help of the police and the FBI. My initial $20,000 was never recovered. I cannot fully describe the emotional and the financial toll this experience has taken on me. The fear, the shame, the helplessness I felt were overwhelming. The Consumer Fraud Restitution Fund would have been a lifesaver, not just for me, but for many others who have fallen victim to this heartless scam. It's easy to think that you'll never fall for a scam, but it can happen to anyone. Scammers exploit our emotions, our fears, robbing us of our financial security. No one should have to experience financial, mental, or emotional distress caused by these criminals. I urge you to consider establishing a Consumer Fraud Restitution Fund to support fraud victims. We must ensure that no one else can go through what I did. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And Ms. Patton, please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Chair Zhang and committee members. My name is Dawn Patton, and I live in Savage. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the countless victims of fraud and scams, including myself. Thank you for allowing me to share my story today. I sought help from what I believe to be a reputable online tech support company to clear up some viruses on my computer. I spoke with someone claiming to be an employee of this company who even provided me with an employee ID. Believing this was a reputable business and employee, I allowed him to access my computer remotely and guide me through the process of resolving the issue. Due to the volume of viruses, I was informed that my membership with this company will be refunded. They asked me to sign into my bank account and they would do a direct deposit. On a separate screen, the employee directed me to enter $200 for my refund. However, to my horror, I could quickly see zeros were being added, making the deposit amount of $20,000 before I could stop it. The scammers insisted that I needed to provide them with $19,800 in cash, claiming I had entered in the wrong amount. We checked our checking account and it did show a $20,000 deposit. They were very upset over my mistake and demanded the difference in cash so they would not have to report this to the IRS. In a state of panic, I went to my Wells Fargo bank to withdraw the cash. Thankfully, the bank recognized the scam and showed me how the $20,000 had been shifted from my savings to my checking account and that it was my money, not theirs. I had to file a fraud report with Wells Fargo and change all my passwords. I could have lost $19,800. This experience was incredibly stressful and deeply upsetting, and my sense of trust has been shattered. We need to safeguard Minnesotans' hard-earned money from criminals who exploit our emotions and target the most vulnerable of us. While I was fortunate not to lose the $19,800, many others haven't been as lucky. Losing that amount would have been financially devastating for me and has devastated far too many others. I urge you to consider establishing a consumer fraud restitution fund to support victims of fraud. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Patton. Next, Jessica Whitney, our last testifier. Please state your name and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, the committee, Senator Rust. My name is Jessica Whitney. I'm the Deputy Attorney General over the large consumer protection section in our Attorney General's office. I want to start off by thanking AARP and Senator Rust for bringing this incredibly important bill. Our office supports it. I also want to clarify for those, and for those who were in the Commerce Committee, apologies, this is going to be repetitive for you, but when we think of fraud and AARP supporting this bill, we often think, oh, it's an older person issue and only older folks are subject to fraud. But actually, if you are 30 to 39, you are more likely to be a victim of fraud. And it used to be 20 to 29 for the longest time, and now it's the 30-year-olds have kind of edged them out. But that's just by way of saying fraud is universal. It attacks us all. If you are older, you are more likely to lose your money. You have more money to lose, right? Those 60 to 69 are have a lot of money to lose and often do lose thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in the frauds. So we're all subject to fraud, and I think the testifiers today have shown us where we have a gap in our ability to help victims of fraud. There are those folks who are completely scammed by these scammers, scammers who aren't criminally prosecuted because it's often hard to track them down. Criminal prosecutors, for various reasons, choose not to pursue them. So they're not able to access any sort of criminal victims restitution fund, and there's no one to go after. So they're left without any money, and they're left, as we've heard, tens of thousands of dollars in the hole. We've also got folks who have been, perhaps, I'm thinking we had a testifier in Commerce who was a client of Woodbury Dental, a dental office that went out of business and took tens of thousands in down payment from her. Or in the AG's office, we pursued a solar company that went out of business. We were alleging they were doing fraudulent things in addition to having gone out of business, but they had no money left for consumers who were left holding, again, tens of thousands in loans in both cases. So there's this gap for both of them. And this fund is the way to fill it. It's the way to take money from cases where we get penalties or sometimes we get very little money left, but we don't want the fraudster to keep any money, and it's not enough money to restitute thousands of victims, and we now turn it back to the general fund. But this would take some of that money and give it back to the folks who need it. I want to end today I was in House Commerce this morning with A.G. Ellison, and we were testifying generally on consumer protection. And at the end of the testimony, Representative Hintzman talked about a constituent who had lost $1.5 million in a cryptocurrency scam. It was his life savings. We're going to try and help this individual, but I think the FBI's tried to help them. The money is probably gone. This man has lost his entire retirement account. This fund is what would help that man. And in fact, right now we've got it capped at $1 million, so it wouldn't be enough. But it would be the kind of case we could bring in the AG's office, even if we don't find the person. We bring it as a John Doe case. It's a default judgment. For you lawyers in the room, no one shows up. We get a quick judgment. It's in and out. And then the claim could be made on this kind of fund. So we can help people starting, day one from this fund.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. And now we'll open up for members and questions or comments on the bill. Thank you, Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, Senator Rest, for bringing this forward. I apologize if I'm sounding cold and indifferent to the testifiers, but I don't know if we really needed you to come in and testify, because I'm sure we all have a similar story, and we do, or I do. And the testifier that talked about getting the phone call, that's literally what happened. The same story from my mom. The person said, "Hi, Grandma." And these people that are praying, I'm sitting here thinking, we're requiring financial literacy to graduate now in high schools. Maybe this needs to be part of the curriculum, is how to detect fraud. I'm so speechless at this legislation, and I just can't thank you enough. And it even got to the point, and my mother had nothing. She lost everything in another scam, and now, but the scammers didn't know she was broke, and so they were wasting their time on her. And but when we were cleaning out her house, we found, because she had nothing left at all, and we found somehow she was getting to what do you call, no, when you go to a place and you sell your jewelry. Pawn shop. She was going to a pawn shop in her small town, and the receipts said, "Grandma, it was great to see you today." So they were even preying on her emotions, and somehow, I don't know if she ever really believed they were her grandchildren, but just calling her grandma as she was getting rid of the few things that she still had, and who was giving her rides to the pawn shop because she didn't have a car anymore. It's shame on all these people, and I don't know. I just feel so sorry for all of you that came in and testified. My heart goes out to my colleagues up here that have similar stories in their families. And at least now with Senator Rest's bill, they'll have somewhere to go to have some sense of consolation that the state cares about them after this misfortunate crime. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. So thanks for all, and I'm sorry, my heart goes out to all the testifiers, but as I said, maybe we didn't need to hear from you because we all have our stories. And so, but I'm sorry for your loss financially and emotionally. And the person that said, "I've lost my trust in my species," that really hit home for me. We don't want to ever, it's sad that whenever we lose trust in our fellow humans is a drag. So I'm sorry for that as well.
Thank you, Senator Swedzinski. Senator Rest, any final thoughts or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to thank two of my co-authors who serve on your committee, Senator Curran, Senator Carlson.
All right, thank you. And with that, Senator Carlson moves that Senate File 447 as amended be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Judiciary Committee. All those in favor say aye. Senator Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for the
Yeah.
author.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the bill, Senator Rest. I'm looking through the fiscal note, and I don't see a reflection of the up to $1 million a year that won't be deposited into the general fund. Where is that, and how is that recorded and expressed? That's
Senator
my question.
Drazkowski, I think council might have
Yes,
an
thank you,
answer
Mr.
for you.
Chairman. That's a question for the fiscal analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senator Drazkowski, the amounts that are could be awarded under this are considered a secondary cost, so there's no assumption that there will in fact be suits that will in fact bring damages and deposit it in a trackable way for purposes of the fiscal note.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there currently money being deposited in the general fund under this statute now?
Mr. Erickson.
Mr. Chair, Senator Drazkowski, there is, but it's not assumed going forward. So if you look at the general fund balance, you can find money that has been deposited in the general fund, but not an expected amount for the upcoming biennia.
So
Senator
Mr. Chair,
Drazkowski.
it sounds like maybe for this purpose, we assume zero going forward. Is that right?
Mr. Erickson.
Mr. Chair and Senator Drazkowski, yes, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator
I would
Rest.
say similarly, Senator Drazkowski, if the bill's successful and gets to the tax committee, the revenue estimate on it for the foregone income, and I see Senator Gustafson is here, same way with coerced debt, it would, the revenue estimate will reflect probably, I've got some feelers out on that, simply unknown, because we can't predict in any given year whether there would be judgments that would send money into the fund. So it'd be negligible or unknown when the revenue estimate is done.
All right. With that, Senator Carlson moves that Senate File 447 as amended be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Judiciary Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion
Mr.
prevails.
Chairman.
Senate File 447 as amended is re-referred to the committee to the Judiciary Committee. Thank you. Next up, Senate File 1592. Senator Kupec, your state songs designation. It looks like you have testifiers here, Dr. Betsy McCann and Ted Fiskbold. Senator Kupec, to your bill.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. This is not, the most important legislation in the world. This is about state songs. We have a state song. It is Hail Minnesota. Turns out Hail Minnesota has actually, thanks to council's indication, has actually never been put in statute. It was just passed just was not passed and put into statute. So it's there, it's a state song, it's not there. So I have a constituent who has brought to me the idea that we should have a couple of other things that kind of are identifiable to a large number of people to Minnesota and to the world, recognizing our state as state songs. And those would be Bob Dylan's song, Girl from the North Country, and Prince's Purple Rain, which are two of the most iconic artists, I think, from Minnesota and represent our state fairly well. The bill also then does put Hail Minnesota into statute as well to keep it there. So what we're doing is basically we're just making a little list of state songs. Other states do this. I think Tennessee has 11 state songs on their list, so we're just adding this in. It's just kind of a thing to recognize where we are here in Minnesota. And I do have, Mr. Chair, an amendment to the bill, actually. This was just brought by council. They just thought it should be placed in a slightly different place than where we had originally placed it.
Thank you, Senator Kupec, for your presentations. With that, Senator Swedzinski moves the A1 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The amendment is adopted. To the testifier, Dr. McCann.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for your time today. My name is Betsy McCann. I'm the Director of Marching and Athletic Bands at the University of Minnesota, and I've been with our marching band for 12 years. Through that time, I've come to know well musical traditions of the university and the state. So I'm here today not as a university representative, but as an expert in some of our historic music, in this case, Hail Minnesota. Hail Minnesota was written in 1904 by a university student. It was originally intended to be the senior class song, and it actually premiered in the senior class play of 1904. That play has been lost to history, but the song was immediately a hit, and it became reperformed and reperformed, eventually being common at university functions large and small. And to this day, we still sing Hail Minnesota frequently in everything from every football game to every graduation ceremony and at events all in between. In fact, I teach this song to literally every incoming university student at their new student convocation each August. But back to the 1900s, after the premiere in 1904, the song became regularly sung in the university and outside the university. And at the same time, there was a push to find a state hymn or any song kind of dedicated to the Minnesota state. It was deemed that Hail Minnesota fit the bill. It had the lyrics, Minnesota, hail to thee, our state so dear. Thy light shall ever be a beacon bright and clear. Thy sons and daughters true will proclaim thee near and far. They will guard thy fame and adore thy name. Thou shalt be their northern star. So this song was brought to the legislature in 1945. The legislature then said, this will be our state song, and I thought that was the end of the story until, as you've heard, we just found that it's not actually codified in state statute. So this would, 80 years after the legislature approved this state song, put this officially as our state song. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. And next, Ted Fixfold. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
My name is Ted Fiskavold, and I live in rural Detroit Lakes in Becker County. I'm grateful to be here today testifying before this committee of the Minnesota State Senate regarding the Rob Kupec-sponsored bill to make Hail Minnesota, Girl from the North Country, and Purple Rain official state songs. I'd like to thank the other state senators who are co-sponsoring this bill, Bobby Joe Champion, Robert Farnsworth, Judy Coleman, and John Hoffman. I wrote this bill about 5 years ago when I did an internet search to refresh my memory on what the Minnesota state song was. It's Hail Minnesota. The search resulted and brought up a wealth of information that entertained a history and music aficionado like myself. And I did find that at that time, Tennessee had 8 state songs, and that was 5 years ago, but I see that they have now added 2 more in 2023 and 2 more in 2024 for an even dozen. And many of these state songs are written by and or performed by prominent American songwriters and entertainers, such as Stephen Foster, Hoagie Carmichael, Woody Guthrie, Felice and Boudleaux Bryant, John Denver, Ronnie Millsap, Pee Wee King, Ray Charles, Arlo Guthrie, Jimmy Davis, and Steve Earle, to name a few. So I got the idea that Girl from the North Country, a song by Bob Dylan, the Minnesota native who was the only American songwriter to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, would make a great additional Minnesota state song. That was 5 years before the recent film A Complete Unknown, a Bob Dylan biopic, was nominated to 8 Academy Awards, introduced millions of people around the world to Bob Dylan, and regenerated an interest in the scores of albums, volume singles, and music videos Dylan has released in 6 decades. And Girl from the North Country was featured in the trailer for that film. Another Minnesota native, Minneapolis artist Prince, is also internationally known. His song Purple Rain, composed by Prince and the Revolution, would make another great additional Minnesota state song. At that time, I felt that if this bill came to fruition and a bill was signed into law, a renewed interest in Hail, Minnesota, with the addition of the Dylan and Prince songs, could spark a state song revival throughout Minnesota. And I could already see and hear school bands and college bands, colleges, students performing the song, starting with a medley. Minnesota, hail to thee, our state so dear. If you go when the snowflakes fall and the rivers freeze and summer ends, and ending with the rousing chorus from Purple Rain, thus blending the old and a couple of new songs that people who were born after World War II could actually relate to, and teaching a little history in the process. So I had this bill, or an idea for a bill. I grew up on Mesabi Iron Range in the small town of Pengilly, halfway between Calumet and Nashwauk, or on a larger scale, 75 miles northwest of Duluth, where Bob Dylan was born, and 15 miles west of Hibbing, where Dylan grew up, and 17 miles east of Grand Rapids. So the natural thing for a red iron ore in the blood Iron Ranger like me to do was to bring my proposal and my proposed bill to Senator David Tomasoni, whose district included Hibbing and my hometown of Pengilly, also home of the late great Minnesota State Senator Norbert P. Arnold. I called David about midway through the 2021 legislative session. He liked it and said, "It's too late to get this into a committee this session, Teddy. I'll sponsor it next session." Several months later, he was diagnosed with ALS, completed the 2022 legislative session struggling with that disease, and David is now a fond memory to this esteemed body of the upper chamber of the Minnesota Legislature, and a fond memory of thousands of other people who were lucky enough to know him. So after Rob Kupec ran for and won the Minnesota State Senate seat that was previously held by Senator Kent Eakin, I told him about this proposed bill. He liked it, and here we are. Senator Kupec's research and work on this bill discovered, as he already said, that Hail Minnesota was not actually the official state song that was signed by the governor and went through the legislative process. And so I'm happy to see this bill getting a hearing. Thank you, Senator Rob, and the co-sponsors. And again, I thank Mr. Chairman and the committee members for allowing me to testify. I did tell Rob on the phone that I could bring a 12-string guitar and a 6-string guitar and a 12-string banjo and perform both of those songs, but I don't think we have time for any of that, so thank you for the time you did give me.
Thank you, Mr. Fiskebold. Next up, we have Ms. Sharon Nelson. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin. Thank you.
All right, I shall. My name is Sharon L. Nelson, and I am the sister, the elder sister, as you can see, of Prince Rogers Nelson. Can you hear me good? Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
right.
Please continue.
Well, this is, such a pleasure, and I'd like to greet all the honorable officials and distinguished guests and fellow citizens of the state of Minnesota. Today is truly a special day, one that honors not just a song, but a legacy. On behalf of the Nelson family, we are deeply humbled and incredibly grateful and thankful for this honor for our brother. Prince poured his heart and soul into music, day and night, night and day, and Purple Rain was no exception. He was more than just a song. It was more than just a song. It was a movement, a story, and a symbol of all emotion and unity that touched people around the world. To see it now recognized as the official state song of Minnesota is an honor that I know would have meant so much to him. Prince loved his home state. Anytime you're in another state, let's say Colorado. Purple Rain comes on, everybody stops, and they listen. This song is well known around the world, not to mention Paris, all right? And he worked tirelessly to create this music that restored generations. To have a Purple Rain represent this great state as a treatment to his enduring impact. To the leaders, the fans, and everyone who made this possible, thank you. His legacy, for keeping his legacy alive and ensuring that his music continues to inspire for generations to come. Prince once said, a strong spirit transitions well, and today his spirit lives on, not just in the melody of the song, but in the hearts of all who call Minnesota home. The creation of this song has an incredible story, which you can learn more about in a book that I have written, and is called When It Rains, It's Purple. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson, and thank you to your brother and your family for celebrating Minnesota. And with that, members, any questions or comments on the bill? Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Sharon, it's good to see you again. I'm Kirk's niece, and we met many, many years ago.
Oh, yes.
And Dr. McCann, my father, would be very mad if I didn't say hi and thank you for all your work with the marching band. I think he still comes and does the alumni band. My only question for Senator Kupec is, which of these songs are you going to sing for us before we pass this bill on?
Senator Kupec.
Thankfully, council has advised me that would be a copyright violation, and I was also the one who was asked to lip sync in chorus in high school because I couldn't hit the notes, so I think I will spare everybody today.
Senator McQuaid.
It's very convenient, Mr. Chair.
Any final comments, Senator Kupec? Senator Ann Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I cannot resist addressing Betsy, what's your last name? Dr. McCann. If you could do something about the fact that the Hail Minnesota words are never fast enough on the big board, because as much as I love that song, the words are hard. So could you do something about that for me, please? Because I think more people would sing along if we actually saw the words. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Kupec. I don't know all these songs. I know two of them, and you know, I could add some more to the list, but it kind of, I guess the question is, we've got other official things in our statutes. We've got an official bird, we've got an official flower, we've got an official tree. There's lots of official things, but there's only one of them. So, Senator Kupec, why didn't you pick one? I don't want us to be Tennessee and have 13 or 14. One would be the answer, in my mind, if you're going to have something official. If all things are a priority, nothing's a priority. But I'd be interested in the author's response.
Senator Kupec.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. I think as generations go by, I think different things speak to different people. And I think, you know, having a song from the early 1900s maybe doesn't speak quite to everybody anymore. And it's still part of our history, though, and I'd like to keep that there. But I think other songs, as we move forward, you know, speak to the, you know, history keeps happening in Minnesota and new things keep happening. And I think if we can add on to that and recognize that without getting rid of our past history, I think that's a good thing.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Kupec. Well, Senator Kupec, the walleye was here before 1904, and it's still popular. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's fun just to have a little frivolity, and I just think of all the third grade, seventh grade kids that have to learn all the state models and state seals and state symbols, and to add these three things to that list. And one of the testifiers is a former student of mine. I'll let the members decide which one it might have been.
Thank you, Senator Swedzinski.
Senator Kupec, am I going to testify also?
Did we, yeah,
I'm on Zoom.
we have a miss, is it Mary Pelchick on remote?
Yes.
Please
Mary
state your name and you
Pelchick
may begin.
Keys.
Yeah, please state your name and you may begin your testimony. Sorry, we didn't have you on there, but thank you for joining us.
My name is Mary Pelchick Keys, and I'm testifying from Hibbing, Bob Dylan's hometown, where my husband and I give many, many tours every year of people who come from all over the world to visit Bob's hometown. In fact, we're giving one this afternoon. And I was very pleased to be asked by Senator Robb to talk about Girl from the North Country. And the best way that I can tell you why this song should be one of the songs is to tell you a little story about Peter Ostrushko. Some of you may know Peter, who sadly has passed away. He grew up in Northeast Minneapolis. He became an exceptional mandolin player. You may have heard him on Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion many times. But before he was that well known, he was a musician in the Twin Cities. And when Bob Dylan was unhappy with the musicians that Columbia Records had found for him for his album Blood on the Tracks, he called his brother David here in Minneapolis and he said, "Get together a group of musicians. I'm coming out there and re-recording this album." And to the anger and disgust of Columbia Records, that's exactly what Bob Dylan did. And one of those studio musicians who backed him up on that album was Peter Ostrushko. In 2006, the group of musicians who had played and gotten no recognition on the original album, their names were nowhere on that original album, they got back together and they said, let's travel around a few places and do a concert. And of course, we all hoped Bob would show up and be the front man again, but he didn't. But it was still a wonderful series of concerts. And one of the places they performed was in Hibbing on the beautiful, historic high school stage. And partway through that concert, the other performers, the other men who were the backing musicians, left the stage and left it just to Peter. And he came out to the footlights with just him and his mandolin. And he said to, and I don't know if you've ever been to Hibbing, you should come and visit our auditorium. It seats 1,800. And it was quite full that night. And he said to the audience, "I think this is the most beautiful song that Bob ever wrote. And I think it should be the state song of Minnesota." And he then proceeded to play on his mandolin and sing Girl from the North Country. You could have heard a pin drop in that auditorium, and the only sound that you began to hear now and then was you could tell people were weeping. There was something so precious about the way he sang that song, and knowing that that little boy who grew up in Hibbing and born in Duluth, and that he grew up to be this person who wrote this gorgeous song along with hundreds of other songs. And I will tell you that last January 2024, my husband Joe and I gave a very special tour around Hibbing that day. We spent the day with the young man who portrayed Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown. And being with Timothy Chalamet for a day, we talked about a lot of Bob's songs. And one of them that he was especially interested in was who is the girl from the North Country? And, well, we told him about Bob's high school girlfriend. But I said, you know, I think all of us who live in this northern state, I think we all like to believe maybe we can be the girl from the North Country. I really appreciate this bill being brought forward. I love Purple Rain. I love Hail, Minnesota. I can hardly sing it after a football game without crying. I think these are worthy songs to say, this is Minnesota. And I know there are more important things, and I know it's a tough world, but let's be proud of Minnesota and say, let's have some beautiful music representing us. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And then Senator Kupec, any final words?
No, I thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kupec. Seeing no further discussion, Senate File 1592, as amended, is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you. And thank you to all the testifiers. I know you've made a long journey to join us here today, and we really appreciate your time and your testimonies. Next up, Senator Kupec, you have another bill, Senate File 1690. And looks like there's a list here of testifiers. We have first up Andrew Morley and Tammy Walhoff. And to the testifiers, we have many testifiers coming from different parts. We would like to ask that the testifiers keep your testimony within 2 minutes. And we will have the timer that will be timing everybody's testimony, so please be thoughtful for some of the other testifiers that have come from a long way to join us here today. And Senator Kupec, to your bill.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a Senate File 1690, also known as the Electronic Waste Recycling Bill. Right now, our electronic waste recycling has not really been updated in about 20 years. Things have changed. The statute is somewhat out of date. Our counties, particularly counties in greater Minnesota, this comes at a very large expense to them for collections. Right now, in a lot of places, when you bring in, say, a TV to be recycled, they say thank you very much, and that'll be $25. And not everybody maybe does that, and they go, well, maybe there's another way I can dispose of this. It falls off the back of a truck, ends up in a ditch. Our counties still then not only have to go pick it up, they still got to figure out how to recycle it. From greater Minnesota, a lot of that electronic waste has to come shipped down to the Twin Cities. So a lot of places are operating their recycling at a loss. The other component of this bill that's kind of key to talk about, I think, is the battery recycling. Batteries, right now, at many of our recycling centers, 3 or 4 fires a week are occurring at those centers. That means that their insurance rates are very high. That also means they have to spend a lot of money on fire suppression, and that is just driving up the recycling rates for everything else. People see the little R on that battery and they go, it's recyclable, and it is, but you can't toss it in the blue bin and then it ends up at a recycling center. And we've seen numerous fires around the state, some catastrophic, like the one up in Blaine a couple of years ago. So this also addresses the battery recycling aspect of that. So with that, I will think I'll just, in essence of time, I'll turn it over to testifiers.
Great, thank you. Next testifier, Mr. Andrew Morley, please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Great, thank you. Chairman Zhang, Senator Kupec, and members of the committee, my name is Andrew Morley and I'm with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Our membership includes more than 6,300 businesses across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to again provide input on SF 1690, legislation that creates a new electronic waste recycling program in Minnesota. The Chamber welcomes the conversation on how to better deal with electronic waste, but remains opposed to the legislation. For almost 2 decades, Minnesota has operated a successful electronics recycling program. 93% of Minnesotans are within 15 miles of an e-waste collection site, and e-waste comprises only about 2% of our waste stream. Chamber members participate at every level of our recycling infrastructure and were instrumental in Minnesota leading the nation in recycling rates. SF 1690 sunsets the current successful program and replaces it with the producer responsibility program that levies costs on manufacturers and importers of electronics. It's another business mandate that covers virtually everything with a plug, circuit board, or battery. Meanwhile, last session, Minnesota became the 5th state to pass an extended producer responsibility law for paper and packaging. SF 1690 would layer a new and undetermined fee with system change requirements for statewide collection of e-waste, making Minnesota the first program nationwide of this scope and size. Because this would be a first-in-the-nation system, only Minnesota will be levying this tax, making our state an outlier once again. We at the Chamber seek to be part of the solution, and we make a strong business case for recycling. Not only does recycling create value from waste streams and stewards our environment, but it helps to alleviate burdens on local government. Minnesota businesses, consumers, and families have said clearly that costs matter. Adding additional fees and regulations, including those that would be passed on to the consumer, detract from the success we've seen and contribute to rising costs in Minnesota. Thank you. I look forward to working with other stakeholders, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. Ms. Tammy Walhoff, please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Zhang and members. My name is Tammy Walhoff. I'm the Director of Lutheran Advocacy Minnesota. We are a ministry of all 6 Minnesota Lutheran synods. Those synods are made up of almost 1,000 ELCA churches and well over 600,000 baptized members statewide. To quote our statement on the care of creation, passed overwhelmingly by the Churchwide Assembly back in 1993, we of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America are deeply concerned about the environment, locally and globally. It should also be noted that we see the despoiling of the environment as nothing less than the degradation of God's gracious gift. As such, we support the Electronic Waste Collection and Recycling Bill, SF 1690, and hope you will recognize its importance to stewardship and care for the earth and its people. We have been hearing from individuals and churches trying to do the right thing by recycling who cannot find how to dispose electronic waste responsibly in whatever part of the state they are located. Free and accessible drop-off or collection must be made available statewide, along with education about what constitutes electronic waste. Until last year's bill, many of us had not considered the danger of improperly disposing of Bluetooth earbuds, singing greeting cards, and other items which pose fire hazards if thrown into the trash. With accessible collection paid for by the manufacturers, our state can guard against toxins in our air and water and extract the minerals that are needed in the production of more batteries and electronics, particularly as we move into the electronic economy. Electronics may be a small part of the waste stream, but they are a huge part of the toxins. True stewardship must consider these concerns. Once passed and implemented, we intend to educate through our church networks and help dramatically increase electronic recycling. Please do not let us down by not passing it. Thanks so very much for your attention, and thank you to Senator Kupec for introducing this bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, Kirk Kudelka and Brian Martinson. Mr. Kudelka, please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Kirk Kudelka. I'm Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency supports electronic and battery product stewardship proposal due to the fire safety, economic, environmental, and human health benefits. I do just want to talk about the current law. Under current law, TVs, computer monitors, and products with embedded recharge batteries and individual recharge batteries must all collect and properly manage their products. However, manufacturers are not fulfilling their obligation. For TVs and computers, nearly 4 million pounds of materials are recycled, are not covered by manufacturers. This represents about 20% of everything that is collected. Even for those pounds that are covered by manufacturers, they're only covering about 1/3 of the costs. For rechargeable batteries, again, removable embedded, which is required already, manufacturers are far from hitting the 90% state requirements. And in many cases, many manufacturers are not even moving forward to collect the embedded batteries that they're required to do. Some manufacturers will say they would do it, but not this bill. However, nothing is stopping them today from carrying out their ideas for collection programs in Minnesota. In fact, many of them are required to do so under current state law. Minnesotans have been left covering the manufacturer's required obligations, and there are also other shortfalls with the current law. For instance, lithium batteries are not being covered, and the fire damage related to that will be talked about later. The current system is not working, which is why this bill is before you to fix the problems. Just real quickly, too, since I know the jurisdiction of the committee is rulemaking, there's a small piece here that allows for optional rulemaking by the agency. We do not foresee rulemaking at the start. It is there if needed as we continue to administer the program if there needs to be clarifications along the process. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kudelka. Next up, Mr. Martinson. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brian Martinson. I'm a policy analyst with the Association of Minnesota Counties and also speaking on behalf of the Solid Waste Administrators Association. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on 1690, a bill that will address an important issue for local governments and residents in managing e-waste and batteries. Minnesota statutes place the responsibility for waste management on counties. They must handle not only what's brought into their facilities or ensure access to responsible management opportunities like recycling, but also deal with items dumped in ditches or left by the dumpster in the park. These costs are real and they're paid by taxpayers. In Itasca County, $50,000 a year, 40% of their state score allotment is spent on e-waste management. Chisago County spent $75,000 a year in addition to what the manufacturers now cover through county costs and fees to manage e-waste. Hennepin County spends over $300,000 a year on just battery management. In 1995, Minnesota established a stewardship program for rechargeable batteries. In 2006, the state banned e-waste from landfills, recognizing their toxic qualities and hazardous waste. The following year, product stewardship was created to manage these products. Unfortunately, those programs are not working. The cost of collection, transportation, and recycling are increasingly falling on local governments and residents or rely on end-of-life fees that discourage proper management. County solid waste facilities are seeing skyrocket in insurance, as has already been shared with you. This proposal will support local governments and residents with better management of these products and a provision providing for the MPCA with rulemaking is important to see that this is properly implemented and ensure the purpose of the law is fulfilled. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you. Next up, we have Maria Jensen and Miriam Holzinger, and then one more testifier is Tony Kiwilas. But we'll start first. Ms. Maria Jensen, please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Maria Jensen, and I'm one of the co-directors of RECA. We are a business association for local electronic waste recyclers located here in Minnesota. Our state is missing a huge opportunity. Our Minnesota's electronic waste stream contains an estimated $3.1 billion worth of valuable metals on an annual basis. But this material is not making it to our recyclers because we are only capturing about 20% for recycling. Just by improving our collection system, we can create 1,700 direct jobs in our state. One recycler located in St. Cloud looks forward to hiring up to 200 employees upon implementation of this program. They, like many other recyclers, have large shredding equipment that is only being used at about 25% capacity. The local ability to process all of Minnesota's electronic waste is already in place. SF 1690 will increase e-waste collection in 3 ways: by providing free and more convenient drop-off for all Minnesota residents, by increasing community education, and thirdly, by simplifying our messaging. This piece is very important. Today, drop-off points across the state have different lists of what they can and cannot collect due to funding restraints. Minnesotans are very frustrated by this system. By providing free collection for anything with a battery, a cord, or a circuit board, we lower the educational hurdle. Another important aspect of this bill as it pertains to this committee is the advisory board. It is crucial that private and public collectors are at the table with producers when reimbursement rates are being determined. Otherwise, we risk losing the businesses that we depend upon for collection. And finally, for those of you who are familiar with this bill, you can see we've made significant changes since last session based on feedback we received from retailers and manufacturers throughout the session last year. We are currently working on incorporating more of those recommendations we have received from stakeholders, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Next, Ms. Holzinger, please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak on this issue. I'm Miriam Holsinger, co-president at Eureka Recycling. We are one of the largest recyclers in Minnesota. We process around 100,000 tons of mostly residential recycling each year. 75% of everything we process stays with manufacturers in our state, supporting our local supply chain. We're also a proud union shop with union mechanics and drivers. Unfortunately, electronics and batteries placed in the recycling cart are impacting the health and safety of our team members and increasing the cost of doing business to an unsustainable level. Working in a recycling facility is already one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. Lithium batteries are making it considerably more dangerous. Over the years, we've experienced as many as 20 fires annually and at times 1 to 2 fires per week. As we've seen at recycling facilities around the country, including a disastrous fire that completely destroyed a $20 million transfer station in Blaine, Minnesota in 2018. These toxic fires can very quickly spread to incredibly flammable plastics and paper. Fires in a truck, which we experienced last spring in St. Paul, or what we call a hot load, are especially dangerous. When this occurs, our drivers have to immediately find a safe space in the community to dump all the burning recyclables, and this can result in injuries, including third-degree burns. Insurance costs have skyrocketed, making it tough for us to stay in business. A recent study from NWRA, the National Waste and Recycling Association, found that the rate of catastrophic losses due to fires has risen by 41% over the last 5 years, which has increased the cost of facility insurance by up to 5,000%. The amount of e-waste is only expected to increase. People love putting batteries in things. Inaction on e-waste will result in continued challenges for Minnesota's recycling industry and continue to harm human and our environmental health. It is time that the state took action to address the improper disposal of electronics by passing this bill. We welcome you to tour our facility and see our team in action. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, ma'am, for your presentation. And looks like we have one more testifier on the list. Please state your name, and you may begin with your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tony Quillis, and Katie Riley, who's from the Consumer Technology Association, wishes she could be here today and was going to try and join us by Zoom, but unfortunately that ended up not working out. But as I said, I'm Tony Quillis. I represent the Consumer Technology Association, which goes by the acronym CTA, and we're the trade association that represents the U.S. consumer technology industry. And thank you for the opportunity today to testify in opposition to Senate File 1690, which would sunset the existing electronics program here in Minnesota, which our members currently fund and support, and establish a very different stewardship program targeting all products containing circuit boards and batteries, which is a huge expansion of the current program that we have right now. As an industry, we've supported proper collection of electronics in Minnesota and under the Minnesota Electronics Recycling Program over the last 17 years and have collected over 500 million pounds of electronics from the waste stream. We understand there are some challenges in the current program right now, and as we have in other states, we're committed to being a good faith partner and moving forward with reasonable legislative changes to the existing program here in Minnesota. We thought we were making some progress in mid-2024, but unfortunately, we weren't able to reach an agreement. Consumer product manufacturers want to ensure their products are recycled in a safe and responsible manner. But unfortunately, the proposal in 1690 would upend the current system for electronics. It would include an expansive proposal on product labeling and a brand new stewardship organization that expands a very broad scope of products that would be impacted. So, Mr. Chairman and members, we're committed to working towards a solution. My dealings with oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. Senator Kupec, over the years, he has been a very open door policy, but unfortunately, the proposal in front of you today with the expanded definitions and setting up a producer responsibility organization that's very broad, that we've never seen nationally before anywhere, is a little bit too big of a hill to climb for us, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'll stick around for questions if there are any.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Members, with that, any questions or comments on the bill? Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the bill, Senator Kupec, kind of. You know, I'm wondering, so there are stewardship organizations in the bill. Are these more nonprofits that we're considering here, that we're actually directing businesses that they have to contract with them? What is their business arrangement of these stewardship organizations?
Senator Kupec or one of your testifiers?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. I think this Jensen or the Deputy Commissioner can probably explain the whole setup of the nonprofits.
Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, for the record, again, my name is Kirk Kudelka, Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. The producers would form or hire a stewardship organization, which would be a nonprofit. They are acting on behalf of the producers. This is what we do already, for instance, for Paint Care, which is a paint product stewardship organization. The paint industry and producers have hired an organization to represent them and carry out their duties under the law.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Kudelka, the paint organization you talked about, are they directed in law to contract with them, or are they contracting with them on their own free will in order to accommodate the law?
Mr. Kudelka.
Mr. Chair and committee members, the producers are moving forward with the product stewardship organization under that. They have to form one plan, and that is a process that's laid out in statute. We would mimic that here, along with other states who have done similar things, where it's a nonprofit is acting on behalf of the producers.
Senator Drazkowski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members, I'm troubled. I wonder about the constitutional implications of this. We are directing businesses in contractual relationships and telling them they have to associate with a nonprofit organization. Would Mr. Quillis answer a question if he's still here?
Mr. Quillis.
He said he'd stick around for questions,
yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Quillis. Mr. Quillis, what can you tell us about, have you done any background on the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution or the contract clause of the U.S. Constitution? What type of constitutional implications does this bill have?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Drazkowski, unfortunately, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't answer the constitutional questions that you have put forth.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Quillis, for answering questions. That's all I have for you. Again, members, Senator Kupec, I'm troubled that we as a state are going in a direction, not only are these organizations being singled out and disproportionately regulated. Has been mentioned, we're the only state in the country doing such wild-eyed ideas like this one that's coming through. The same thing with the paint tax that we had that was mentioned by Mr. Kudelka earlier, that was passed by an earlier legislature. We continue to bring more and more oppression to businesses in our state. And the environmental folks in our state seem to hate businesses so much that we are chasing them out of here. And Senator Kupec and members, the more we continue to do this, the more we're going to run the economics of this state into the ditch. And that's what we are doing. I don't know how we expect businesses to survive, not to mention that in this bill, we are telling them who they have to contract with, Mr. Chair. I just can't believe we have something like this before us today. This extreme direction we're going should be troubling and alarming for every Minnesotan. The activists in this state have taken over their legislature, and they are headed in a very bad direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Any other questions or comments? Senator Mayquade.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Kupec, slightly different vibe for me. I'm deeply grateful to you for working on this bill, because obviously there's a lot of work that has gone into it, and also for folks who have come to the table to talk about this at length over the interim. But I don't know how we can keep doing what we're doing. I mean, I have a 2-year-old, and I've never had so many batteries in my house as I do right now, with all of her toys and all of, all these things. And we're just, I mean, we are contributing like 1 million pounds of batteries to this problem just with my toddler alone. And I just, we've had so much technology change. I mean, think about how much technology has changed in the last 5 years, let alone the last 20. And so I think the flexibility that's in this bill is actually really good, because it's allowing folks to figure out what works best for them. And I think that the conversations are going to continue, if I'm not mistaken, to make sure that we're all getting clarity. But, change is hard, even good change, but this is good change, because we can't have an e-waste bill that doesn't reflect the current world we live in. And so I deeply appreciate the work that you did to get here, and maybe I'll be the 5th author on this bill.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. Senator Coran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Kupec and maybe the Assistant Commissioner. So when we talk about the producers, right, those are the people who produce batteries, every electronic device we have that has a circuit board or a screen or whatever. So do we have an inventory of those today, and how will that inventory, will we track those?
Senator Kupec or Assistant Commissioner? Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, again for the record, Kirk Adelka, Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Thank you for the question. The e-waste program already has folks registering with the state, so we have those list of individuals. There is a product stewardship law for individual loose batteries and those embedded in products. Some of that law is being fulfilled by another product stewardship organization, a nonprofit called Call to Recycle, which we have the names of companies there. So that would be part of how we have that information. In general, when product stewardship programs are formed across the nation and various types of products, industries are doing this to comply. They would need to be able to be put on a list, and there's requirements on here to put together that list. And then there's a process included in the bill to bring on companies into the fold if they are not a member of a product stewardship organization, not fulfilling their duties, so that we capture those so there are not free riders.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Coran.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. So we have some that voluntarily registered, some that you appeared at the last part of your statement was some that you've identified that you're going to try and urge into this program. But when you think about every resource where these products come from, they don't all come direct from a retailer stateside. So you're tracking all retailers or any producer, not retailers, any producer from a worldwide perspective, and how are we tracking those into the state of Minnesota?
Mr. Kudelka.
Mr. Chair and committee members, we have worked with other organizations. Again, Call to Recycle is one of them, for instance. If they are aware of manufacturers that should be a part of the program and not, we worked cooperatively with them to get them enrolled into the program to make sure they're complying with the laws. There is a requirement to be part of a program to be able to sell into the state, and so we would do compliance efforts, whether it's a brick and mortar or an online system for that.
All right, thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chair. And so then when we go to apply the costs to these producers, the volunteers pay the majority of the burden? How do we ensure that every single producer is paying their equal share? And how long would that take to identify everybody and to put this into place? I just would love to know the scale and the scope of the thousands of producers of these products from all over the world, and that you're going to track them and somehow be able to measure, not only just track them and identify them, but you're tracking the sales or the quantity and the production of those that they produce on a worldwide basis, and then those that happen to land in Minnesota. So give me a little view of what that looks, because it looks like a pretty complicated matrix.
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. The Product Stewardship Organization would divvy up the cost of the program amongst its members. It has the leeway, the freedom to decide what manufacturers are charged what based on the type of products, the cost associated with their products. That would be done something internal with the Product Stewardship Organization. It is not something the state would do. We have already some of these systems set up across the states, whether it's e-waste or batteries, so they would build upon those learnings to build what is needed here in Minnesota.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Coran.
Appreciate it. Still didn't help with the size and the scope, but so this appears, at least from a couple of the testifiers, to be nowhere else in the world has taken an approach. Could be great. I don't know that I see that yet. What do we anticipate the additional cost will be that will be reflected in the retail rates of those that voluntarily participate in this program?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, some of these things are already being done, so those costs are already into the system. Unfortunately, too much of that cost right now is on to the consumer. Whether it's going to a county and being charged anywhere from a $10 to $25 charge to get rid of their e-waste. What this does is internalizes it in the cost of production of the facilities, so that would be done at that point. The bill, there are e-waste product stewardship programs across the state, the nation. There are loose battery product stewardship organizations. There's an embedded battery law in another state that's being worked on too. So there's a lot there to build already from, and they have incorporated this into their models for funding these type of things. So it's not on the individual residents, the Minnesotans paying for it out of their pocket. It's just through the cost of the manufacturer.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Grant.
And thank you, Assistant Commissioner. So in that case, you don't believe that anything will be reflective in, say, our border retailers who go into, or you choose to go into South Dakota, where it's already 4%, 5% cheaper to buy a product just because of sales tax. Wisconsin's not a cheap place to shop, but it's a lot cheaper than here. We don't think that'll be reflected in any of our border states, or our residents that have the privilege of being access or near a border. They can just go over and buy their product. Will ultimately be cheaper in those other states.
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, the bill does not have an upfront fee. It prevents that. It would be built into the manufacturer's overall cost, which is spread across the nation and across their sometimes global markets and incorporated in that way.
Senator Coran.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coran. Maybe any other questions or comments? Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're assuming that, my question is to the Assistant Commissioner. So you're going to assume that companies are, if we put this requirement on there that they must pay this fee in Minnesota, that they may or may not stop providing those pieces here in Minnesota? Providing, selling in Minnesota? I'm assuming that's the assumption you're making, Mr. Chair?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I think I got the gist of the question. If I don't answer it, please ask again. So the manufacturers already, for some of these items, have to have a collection program, or they are not able to sell in the state. There are lists then that are created to help identify who those are. It would ultimately be up to the manufacturers to decide whether or not to sell in the state like they are today. That is up to them, whether they want to join into the Product Stewardship Organization. However, for some of these products, there are multiple states that have this. E-waste, there are 25 different states with e-waste programs. There are a handful of states that have it for batteries, and they're continuing to add. So this would be something that our responsibilities, not only in Minnesota, but for instance, for batteries and e-waste, are things that are across the nation. So companies are opting into these to be able to sell across the nation, not only in Minnesota.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've also heard today that this is the first in the country. So I'm kind of confused on how we've got 25 other states doing one thing, and yet this is the first in the country. So I went to my local county. So I'm in Anoka County. So I go to their website. They have a hazardous waste collection thing, and it doesn't cost $25. It's just show a driver's license that you have an address in Anoka County. They'll collect it for free. And I went down their list. Circuit boards are not on here. So do I have to go somewhere else? And where would this circuit board be collected? Eventually, it sounds to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like we're going to end up with either I have to take my things other places, which I can tell you human nature is going to be, I'm not going to make a trip to get rid of a couple of batteries to someplace else. I'm just going to fire them in the garbage can, which isn't what we want. So am I going to end up with a third basket? You know, I've got garbage, I've got recycles, and I have electronic waste. Am I going to end up with a third basket by the driveway now? Mr. Chair?
Was that a question for one of the
Any one of them.
testifiers?
Whoever wants to field it, please.
May I proceed, ma'am?
Chair, thank you. Maria Jensen, for the record. Senator, the problem you're describing is actually what we're trying to fix. So right now across Minnesota, all the different counties, they have different lists of what they're able to collect and what they're not able to collect. And actually the definition, circuit board, battery, or a cord is kind of describing the types of items that contain those things that should be collected at all the collection sites after this bill passes. So circuit boards are not listed on your county's website because those are inside the devices. But after this program is implemented, they will have funding to collect anything that contains a circuit board, a battery, or has a cord to be plugged in. So we're expanding the list of items that they can have funding to collect from you at their household hazardous waste site.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I got this right, everything that has a cord, has a battery, is a hazardous waste of any kind, I will have to go to a centralized location to pick it up. Is that correct?
Ms. Jensen.
Chair. This expands how many collection sites there will be across Minnesota, so you'll have more options of where you can take those items.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to have to go somewhere to get these items collected. And I can tell you that it's going to be the same hurdle, and I'm not saying it's not a worthwhile endeavor to actually get this collected, but this is probably not the right process. I think you would get a lot better collection if you just had a third basket at the end of the driveway, or you're alternating weeks on recycles and electronic waste. You get something better than that, because human nature is not going to be get in the car, drive to a specific spot, pay somebody, or even for free, drop my stuff off. I got to haul it again to somewhere else to get my hazardous. If I buy a new computer, I got to take the old one somewhere and pay to have it disposed of. There's a long list, and we see that in the bill, a long list of things that we're going to collect or we want collected, but that's not human nature. If it's tough to take my double A's are just going to end up someplace that you don't want them, because it's not cost effective to the individual, or it's time restrictive to take it someplace else. And most of us are pretty short on time as it is now. So while the concept might be good, I don't think this is the solution to your problem.
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Barr. Senator Johnson-Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Senator Kupec. Senator Kupec, could you explain for us why you even are going to the trouble of this bill? What's the overall objective? And then I have a follow-up, please.
Yeah, Senator Kupec.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators Johnson-Stewart. So, I mean, partly it is right now, our counties are picking up the bill for this, and they're coming back on property taxes because they're not being made whole. So we're paying for this in one way, shape, or form. And last year, we had a bill like this, and it was a fee on the end of it where you would buy it, and we heard from, stakeholders that was not what they would prefer. They would prefer this, where we went back to manufacturers as stated. It is almost like the whole world will be, in a way, paying for this if you just figure it into whatever that cost of that manufacturing is. And there are other states that do this. I will say this is a more comprehensive plan than we've seen in other states, but other states have had this up and running, and this was what was pointed to us last year when we brought the bill forward. They said, oh, look at what they're doing in Oregon, and it is based on what other states have done. But some of this is a realization that these things are going into our landfills, which are, in my county, our landfill is getting filled up. And where the cost for the county to site another landfill and even to go through that process is going to be exorbitant upon them. And so anything we can do to extend the life of that is better. Also, about 25% of our garbage, or so we own 25% in an incinerator. Those things go. When those things are not put through the incinerator, that gets a better burn. It's cleaner, it's more efficient, and it is a better process for that. So by and large, the start of this was really in conversations, with my counties, knowing that they are not being, made whole in the end. And so that's where I started at. And then there's just there are added, I think, environmental factors. So I'm always looking, I think, for those win-win things. Here's something that can make our counties whole, help in the property tax thing, help on that score, and then also help the environment. So that's the gist of where this came from.
Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Senator Kupec. And I guess I'll just remind people that counties are responsible for solid waste in our state. Some of us live in Hennepin County, and we have these kinds of programs and collection sites, but lots of you and lots of our colleagues don't live in Hennepin County. They live in one of the other 86 counties. So this, I applaud you, Senator Kupec, for being responsive to your counties. And I'm a little surprised that my colleagues on this committee that represent more than one county aren't a little bit more interested in helping their counties address this big issue. To put things in perspective, the chamber representative mentioned that our e-waste is only 2% of our waste stream. Did you know that in Minnesota, we produce 4.5 to 5 million tons of garbage a year? Some of it's burned, a lot of it is landfilled. If we take just 2% of that, that is 182.8 million pounds of e-waste. I don't know, how much does that weigh? And I think it's a shame if we're throwing that in a landfill or incinerating it. Frankly, we do not have enough room in our landfills for e-waste. Now think for the last 20 years, how much more e-waste do you have in your house than you had 20 years ago? I mean, with the exception of those monstrously huge computers we used to have, or TVs, how many of you have 5 TVs in your house? How many of you have 10 mouses? How many of you have just a huge number of, to Senator McQuaid's point, batteries? We fill up a coffee tin of batteries a month and take them to Home Depot. And frankly, I'm glad to do that because it's good for the environment. I have one more question for Ms. Jensen, please.
Senator Johnson.
Ms. Jensen, you mentioned something about incorporating or implementing this bill would make waste easier to harvest and to extract the precious metals and minerals from it. Could you talk a little bit more about why it would be easier to do that? I think you mentioned something like we're only recycling some very small percentage of our e-waste right now. If you could just take a few minutes and tell me that again.
Ms. Jensen.
Chair. As Maria Jensen for the record. It's about economies of scale. So our members are private electronic waste collectors and recyclers, and if they are able to process more pounds, they can run their shredders for longer periods during the day. Our members tell us that they run their shredders about 50% of the time, 25% of the time that they could be running them. So it would create better economies of scale for the collectors and help the electronics waste recycling industry here in our state. They plan on hiring lots of new employees to do this and get this material processed, but the physical assets that they need, by and large, they already have. So it would create a lot of efficiency for them.
Senator Johnson Stewart.
Yes, Ms. Jensen, could you remind us of what kind of materials they get from e-waste? Is it just aluminum, or what other kind of metals might they be able to get by recycling?
Ms. Jensen.
Chair. Gold, platinum, palladium, cobalt, lithium, these are all copper, these are all metals that are in our circuit boards and batteries that can be extracted and reused in new electronic devices.
Senator Johnson-Stewart.
No, I just want to remind people that at a time when we're talking about this desperate need for minerals and metals to power our electric vehicles, our cell phones, our whatever, and saying the only way we could possibly ever get enough metal to do that would be to mine in places that are already protected and otherwise pristine, and yet we're ignoring this opportunity, which in my understanding, would far surpass the amount of minerals that we have in areas like the boundary waters, for example. I think it's irresponsible and ridiculous for us not to support this bill and optimize this 91,000 tons of garbage that we're throwing away that even at conservative estimates, we could be harvesting those really precious metals from. So thank you, Senator Kupec. I'm grateful for this bill, and I look forward to supporting it.
Thank you, Senator Johnson-Stewart. Any other questions or comments? Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a fiscal note for this bill, Mr. Chair?
Maybe fiscal staff can answer that for us.
Mr. Chair, Senator Drazkowski, there's one requested but has not been completed.
Senator Drazkowski.
So, Mr. Chair, what's the plan for this bill? Are we going to wait to act on it until we can actually see what the fiscal implications of the bill are?
We would like to move it to Judiciary Committee. Senator Drazkowski.
Well, Mr. Chair, how are we going to make judgment about the fiscal impacts then once it's in Judiciary Committee?
Well, Senator Drazkowski, I think that what's relevant for this committee is the new board and rulemaking authorization in the bill, and it's still going to go to the Judiciary Committee. Senator Kupec, any questions, any final comments on the bill?
Sure. With that, there is an item in the governor's budget for this too, where there is a cost that's stated on it. So,
any final words for your bill?
no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and with that, Senator McQuaid moves that Senate File 1690 is recommended to pass and be referred to the Judiciary Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senate File 1690 is recommended to pass and be referred to Judiciary. Thank you, Senator Kupec. Next up, members, we have Senate File 787, Senator Mann's bill. Senator Mann, welcome to the State and Local Government Committee. Please state your name and you may begin with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I do have an author's amendment.
Senator Mann, to your amendment, let me see here in the packet here. Senator Mann moves the A1 amendment, I'm sorry. Senator Carlson moves the A1 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The A1 amendment is adopted. Senator Mann, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senate File 787 makes changes to the open meeting laws. It erases language that makes it unsafe for people to attend meetings virtually, allows people to attend more than 3 meetings virtually if they need to, and it changes the notice requirement so that people aren't prevented from participating based on a technicality. For example, 1, if you are participating virtually right now because you are taking care of your spouse who has norovirus, for example, and they can't get out of bed, by law, your home must be open and accessible to the public, which is unsafe for everyone and quite frankly is a bit crazy. Right now, under the law, if your babysitter gets sick and doesn't show up that evening, you cannot participate from home because of notice requirements that were not met. In the area of unaffordable childcare, this disproportionately prevents women from participating in their communities and local governments. And 3, if you break your ankle and you cannot get around in the snow, you can no longer participate because the 3-meeting limit, despite the fact that while your ankle is broken, we have technology that allows you to fully participate. So that's it. It's a very simple bill to update outdated language that, given our laws, have not quite kept up with the technology that now exists and allows us to be present and participate in different ways. With that, Mr. Chair, we have testifiers.
Thank you, Senator Mann. Looks like we have 2 testifiers here. Laura Osnavad, I'm sorry, ma'am. And then Dr. Terry Morrow. Welcome to the State Government Committee, ma'am. Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Zhang and committee members. My name is Laura Oxnavad, and I am honored to testify before you today as a St. Anthony New Brighton School Board member representing both the Association of Metro School Districts and the Minnesota School Boards Association in support of Senate File 787. The expansion of online streaming and remote access to board meetings, one of the beneficial lessons of the pandemic, has greatly enhanced public access to our proceedings. No longer are school boards and their communities limited to only in-person participation. However, current restrictions still prevent school board members from fully utilizing remote access when unpredictable circumstances arise, such as illness, childcare needs, transportation challenges, or work emergencies. Our school board has encountered several barriers under the current statute that have hindered our ability to conduct business effectively. Last year, our school board chair tested positive for COVID-19 on the day of our regular meeting. Despite experiencing only mild symptoms, he was unable to participate remotely because his location had not been posted 3 days in advance, as required by law. If this restriction had not been in place, he could have not only contributed, but also led the meeting, ensuring continuity of leadership and informed decision-making. A fellow board member had to miss a meeting when her child became ill at the last minute. While she was able to watch the meeting remotely, she was prohibited from participating. Her valuable insights and perspective were lost simply due to an outdated restriction. And just last month, our newest board member became sick before a crucial decision and vote. Determined to fulfill her duty, she masked up and attended the meeting in person, potentially putting others at risk because there was no option for her to participate remotely. These examples highlight how the current statute creates unnecessary obstacles for school board members who want to serve their communities effectively. Senate File 787 offers a practical solution by allowing remote participation while maintaining full transparency for the public. Our school boards should reflect the communities they serve, and modernizing these regulations will help ensure that all individuals, regardless of personal circumstances, can fully participate in the democratic process. This legislation enhances accessibility not only for the public, but also for those elected to represent them. I want to extend my sincere thanks to Senator Mann and co-authors, including Senator May Quaid, and to the committee for the opportunity to share our experiences. I urge you to support Senate File 787 and help remove unnecessary barriers to effective governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And Dr. Morrow, please, you may,
Thank you,
please
Mr.
state your
Chair.
name for the record and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I am Terry Morrow, General Counsel for the Minnesota School Boards Association, and I think the 2 prior speakers really summed it up well. What I will add, Mr. Chair, is that this is the most common problem we hear from school board members across the state. Every one of your districts has board members who have called us every year because their child became sick the night before, or they tested positive for COVID, or their child care fell through, or the weather was too bad to drive. This is a good fix to a law that is now 30-something years old, 30 years old, and predates the Zoom era. And with that, Mr. Chair, I believe that the testifier and Senator Mann did a wonderful job. I'll stand prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, member questions or comments on the bill? Seeing none, Senator Mann, any closing comments? Seeing no further discussion, Senate File 787 is laid over. Senate File 787, as amended, is laid over. Thank you. And with that, members, the State and Local Government Committee is adjourned.